Well, good afternoon from the Canadian Rockies. I am wandering along a very special shallow lake here. It is called Lac de Arcs. This was originally where William Van Horn had intended to build his great hotel in the mountains, and then chose the site of Banff. It's a very shallow lake, but the reason I'm here this time of year, you might need to zoom in if you can do so. I don't have a zoom on here right now, but these are swans. We have migratory swans. There's also plenty of ducks. These are probably trumpeter swans. We have trumpeter and tundra swans that come down, and they stop here on their way north in the spring. So this is the end of April, and they travel up north, and then they come back down, and we see them usually in October as they're heading south. So they're all over the water. Of course, all sorts of waterfowl, but they're spectacular birds out there. And I have a lot to share with you just in a few minutes here. It's just a treat to come here. I'm right across from the Trans-Canada Highway on the other side. I want to show you this little tree that's been chewed down right here. That is beaver activity. Beaver is, of course, the national animal of Canada. I always have to ask, why do we consider it the greatest of all national animals? Because all the other ones, eagles, bears, tigers, are all predators, whereas the Canadian national animal gives a damn. It's a classic joke. Let me just curve around up here. There is Heart Mountain. Now, Heart Mountain is often the first one you really see as you're driving into the mountains, or you see Yamnuska on the other side, which I cannot show you right now, but you'll see the very distinct heart shape on the top of that mountain up there. It's a nice, very doable hike, except for people do get in trouble on that mountain because they'll sometimes go off the trail and go around on the cliff faces on the side and need rescuing. But right out here, we are on the extreme east entrance or outlet, because just after these rounded mountains here, all of a sudden, you're out into the foothills of the Canadian prairies. Of course, we're in the province of Alberta. This is the mighty Bow River here, already developing just a distinct turquoise color. Now, most of our area around here is protected. Banff National Park, Kananaskis country, but this is the one little bit of industry out here. Right there is Lafarge and Baymag. These are big cement plants out here. And whilst one doesn't necessarily like to see a big factory right in the mountains, it's not terribly polluting, and it creates some real work in the valley. And so it is a factor. And there's a little community over there called Exshaw. And if you've never been to Exshaw, make sure next time you come to the Rockies, drive out on the 1A and drive through the old road. In fact, when the national parks were created, the original entrance to the parks was over on the old road, of course, because the Trans-Canada hadn't been built. You might just catch, I'll use my finger out there in the distance. And that is where the original road into here, of course, the trains predate the road. The trains arrived here in 1883. Now, sorry, I'm going to curve back here because some of the swans are just taking off in the distance. They're getting full of food, and they're getting ready to start flying further up north. So again, the bigger the screen, the better to watch this particular video. In the distance, I'm looking up to the grassy range up there. The big point out in the distance on it is Hapling Peak, named for Mr. Hapling. He was a worker in the camp when they were building the trains. It is said in the west of Canada, for every kilometer of train, 2 Chinese workers lost their lives. Well, Mr. Hapling made a bet in camp that he could climb to the top of that mountain and back in a day. Well, the bet was either $5 or $50. Well, he successfully did it. In fact, he apparently had to do it a second time and go put up a flag to prove he had done it. And for years and years and years, that mountain peak up there, the one distinctly in the middle of the screen, was known as Chinaman's Peak. Well, eventually it was pointed out, quite rightly so, that you don't name a first ascent after someone's ethnicity, you name it after the person. So in the 1990s, they took the name away, and it was actually the peak formerly known as Chinaman's Peak for a period of time. And then it was renamed Hapling Peak, H-A-L-I-N-G. And I spent a lot of time climbing up that, both the front and the back of it. Here's another one of these trees that's been chewed by beaver. They're always at sort of distinct height, because of course that's about as big as the beaver gets. Now, this Lac des Arcs used to be popular for windsurfing, but there's just too many reeds in there, and the water is quite shallow, although the reflections are pretty spectacular. Now, I just heard birds calling out in the distance. So here's the flowing river. So do allow me to turn around. I'm going to walk back because there is an osprey nest. It's a mating pair of osprey are back on an old tree trunk out there. when you see these giant trees out in the water, you realize what really happens in high water. Of course, rivers in the west of Canada and in the north, places like Alaska, have got the huge volume differences between winter and summer. The water cycle is a very clear one. You have all the snow, that melts off in spring, the water comes up, then the rivers are supported by glacial melt. Of course, the headwaters of this river, about 120 kilometers west of here, and that's off the Wapta Icefield and the Bow Glacier and Bow Lake. In fact, I have a YouTube video from Bow Lake there. And then when the glaciers freeze up in about October, water levels drop and the rivers are supported by the groundwater. But when you get that melt in spring, and we're having a fairly early spring at the moment, you have all the snow comes down from throughout the mountains and the rivers can come up and they'll wash out some of the trees that come along the way. I'm just listening to a raven calling out. Now it's lovely to be walking over here to share this little video with everyone, because if I were over by the Trans-Canada Highway, it is a big, busy highway, of course, and there's a lot of noise that echoes off the mountains on the backside there. Now we are, of course, distinctly in the Canadian Rockies. This route for the trains was plotted out between 1857 and 1860 by the Palliser expedition, which came out of Fort Garry, which you'd probably call Winnipeg today. And they traveled through and they found eventually the pass, which is the border between Alberta and British Columbia, right there at the Continental Divide, where Banff ends and Yoho Park begins, and found a route into BC. Now this is most importantly the land of the Stoney Nakoda First Nation. Their nation is just out here, although this is all of their land. And in the early establishment of the national parks, many of the indigenous people were removed from their lands, another scar in the history of this country's history. But their culture is alive and well. 3 different bands that constitute their land out here. They would have come in as the Blackfeet people did as well. The Blackfoot Confederacy was all around southern Alberta here. They'd come into these mountains to hunt for bison, but they would go all the way up to the Continental Divide and trade with the Kootenai or Kootenai people from over in the British Columbia side. Of course, it wasn't British Columbia historically, and they would have traded bison for salmon, which seemed like a pretty fair deal on both accounts. But after this area was plotted through by the Palliser expedition, really the trains should have gone through much further north, up by Jasper. It's an easier pass, the Yellowhead Pass, and I always love this story, but La Passe de la Tête Jaune, and they called them Yellowheads because during the fur trade, for the first time, indigenous people saw blonde hair. And they were mostly French fur traders, hence it was in French La Tête Jaune. But the decision was made to bring the train through this southern route down here. Do you know, I think that's actually a pair of loons out there. I can't promise. We'll see if they dive. Probably ducks, but they could be. They look big. And so the decision was to bring the train through the southern route here because, of course, we're closer to the border with the United States. It's still a 4-hour drive from here to get down there. No, they're ducks. I think they might be coots. However, it was very, very hard construction. They came in here, and of course, if you know some of your history of Canada, they financed the trains with the grand hotels, which then, as we say, was the birthplace of tourism. Yeah, so it is pretty spectacular. Now, Alberta is famous for its blue skies. Now, right out in front of me on this log out there, there is an osprey standing up over her nest. They may have eggs already because she kept looking down, and then the partner keeps coming back and bringing tufts of soil, so they're clearly working on the nest. So maybe they don't have the eggs yet, but it's kind of lovely to see them out there. And then if I curve around over here, all of the swans have moved now. These are all ducks out along here. If we went up and over these mountains, we'd be over in Kananaskis country. You'll see that very obvious canyon up through there too, which is testament to just how porous the Canadian Rockies are. So I just want to come up a little closer, see if I can show everyone the osprey. Let's curve around. By the way, you can dig around on the edge of this lake and you will find fossils out through here. Again, all the limestone is famous for that. This was all ocean seabed about 370 million years ago. There's other sections as old as 530 million years. And we can even go rock climbing on classic coral reef. Again, it's an old reef, but that's what it's there. So, okay, there is the Osprey, probably daddy, flying along and carrying branches coming just into the nest. Again, the bigger the screen, the better. And now the two of them are together. So let me just come up a little closer. I don't want to get close to them, of course, because I don't want to scare them. They're busy doing their thing, and I'm not here to disrupt their lives. Oh, and it's fun. There's people putting kayaks in the river across from us. Very little traffic out here on the water, but the town of Exshaw is over there, and that's where people can pick up their boats. I'm right by a tiny community known as Lac de Arcs with some beautiful homes just hidden in amongst the trees on this side of the river here. So I'm just focusing over on these lovely two osprey. The osprey migrate, of course. In the wintertime, our rivers freeze over and they're fishing birds and they cannot fish. But they're in the nest. They're just working away. If you've been to places, I always think in New England, for example, I've seen gigantic osprey nests because they don't migrate away along the ocean. So they become generational that way. These ones have to come back and do work to fix it up every year. So hopefully you're able to scan in. I am going to keep playing with my technology on YouTube here as we grow, so I'll try and get a better zoom at some point. But if you would like to connect, please do. I am on live virtual tours on the website To Me Tours. You can connect with us. And I just did a live virtual tour here, but because the birds are so migratory, I wanted to get something here for posterity. To be what, as I say, I don't want to scare the birds at all, so I'm just going to come down onto the marsh. This is all rock flour. It looks like quicksand, but it isn't. It's all just ground up mountains here. They're ground up by the glaciers, and then it turns in very quickly around here. There we go. There's Daddy flying away. All right. Well, I'm not going to go any closer because I don't want to disturb the birds anymore. So I'm just going to wander along the snow here. Oh, there's Dad flying around as well. Gorgeous, gorgeous animals, aren't they? Osprey are just such beautiful birds. So this is the migratory time of the year, so it's so much fun to enjoy them. So hopefully not. Oh, that's interesting. Little crows flying over as well, but they're not minding each other. There comes the dad in again. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, listen, thank you for coming along. If you don't mind subscribing, that's great. Apparently, I want to get over 1,000 subscribers and then I become something. I don't know what, but it's just nice to share these videos and keep them for posterity. So here, I'll just give a quick little curve around here, and I'll say peace and love, and have a beautiful time wherever you are in the world. But a warm hello from the Canadian Rockies here, and from all the wonderful bird life. And I will see you all here in person one day, I hope.